Well, thank you for coming. This is like the third meeting of our Pinecrest US1 visioning exercises, and I bet you've been asking each other, why are we here? I just want to let you know that we organized this meeting to give everybody an opportunity to speak on this topic in a face-to-face discussion. I think we had met 2 times before. In the first meeting, people had made the request to come and give their input face-to-face, so we're doing that. We're not presenting any new information. We don't actually have a proposal yet. This is more of the aspect of the process where we're listening to people, trying to figure out what we can, cannot do. Hi guys, we just got started. Welcome here. So we thought we'd get going. And I'll try to answer some of the questions that you may have as we go. What we're going to do tonight is a brief presentation. I'll do it. Yossi's going to talk about a little bit what we've done since 2012. And then we're just going to open it up for questions and comments so we can get your opinions face to face. We actually began this process back in January of 2021, so it's just about a year ago. And we would hope to move through it a little bit more quickly than we did, but the water issue came up and a handful of things, and we got started really with our workshops, I want to say in November. And this is about 10 years ago, we had done a US1 vision plan, and we had not revisited US1 since that time, and this we thought was probably a very good time to do it, since that plan was 10 years old and a variety of other reasons which I'll get into. Each year, regardless, we have 2 primary plans that guide our policies. One's the comprehensive plan, which is our overall policy document. The other one's our zoning code, which tells, from a building perspective, how buildings can be built on a piece of property. And so we look at those pieces of code every year. But we haven't looked at them relative to US1 in a long time, so we're doing that. So just like the Inspire Pinecrest that we did a few years ago, this is really an exercise to have at first a conversation, introduce a topic, figure out what the feelings of the community are, and then ultimately, if we felt like we should move forward, we'd ask the staff to put together a plan. A plan would come together. We would meet in a forum like this or virtually and discuss it, and if we could get consensus or we felt the council had enough information to move forward, it would eventually come to the village council. They would vote on it up or down. So that's how we begin to form these plans. A lot of conversation has been around the fact that one county commissioner in Miami-Dade County had introduced a concept to expand the rapid transit zone districts, and I'll explain that in the system. That in its original form would have taken the ability for cities to form their own land use and zoning. Those decisions would have taken that away from them. And so there's been some progress on that to date, and I'll update you on that in a minute. But really, this is us. First off, we're going to do everything we can not to let them take our authority away from us, so there's really no point in being a municipality anymore. And so this is us really exercising our rights of self-determination, and that's essentially why we incorporate. So why do we do this type of stuff? Why do we do this type of planning stuff? Because things are always changing, right? Things are constantly changing, and we try to be prepared for the changes that come about to us as much as possible. And we never stop trying to adapt to an ever-changing world. And if you look at Pinecrest over the last 25 years, you realize that Pinecrest is a vastly different place than it was when we incorporated. But because we go through these types of processes, we're able to maintain the character of our community, and we've been able to enhance the quality of life. And those things have kept Pinecrest more like it was, despite all the physical changes that have happened around us. And that doesn't happen by accident, and not a lot of cities can achieve that, but it happens here because we undergo processes like this, where we come together as a community, we start to put the issues out on the table, we debate them in a civil manner, and then we figure out how to move forward. So I just want to talk about some examples, because oftentimes we don't realize how much the community has changed. And the way I look at the community, it's got 4 sets of neighbors. You got your governmental neighbors, you've got your residential neighbors, all of us that live in the homes, we've got our institutions, and then we've got our commercial neighbors. And look what government's done over the years, right? This facility in and of itself was a trailer park. at the time. And there was a little bit pushback when we came to buying this place and making it from a trailer park to a park, and it worked out pretty well. We also did a lot of acquisition of land, of acquiring other pieces of land that we made into parks, and made our most recent acquisition just recently for the Palermo property, which will be Gary Matzner Park. And since that time, 25 years ago, we've even had to rehabilitate those facilities because they do age and things do change. We've got a community that years ago didn't have access to potable water. Now we're able to have everybody the opportunity to have potable water. We have got a community that years ago, at the least bit of a hurricane, the electricity would go out. Now we're working with FP&L to underground $20 million, 20 miles worth of power lines. So those are things that we understood were weaknesses within the community. We addressed them, and we're a better place for it. When you don't pay attention to your zoning code, things can happen that you don't intend. And if you looked at the east side of town, we incorporated, and the homes that existed were very small homes on very large lots. And the unintended consequence within the zoning code that we had was people would come in and build the McMansions, right? So you got these big giant houses. They were always allowed, right? Nobody ever maximized the footprint of the house on the land until sometime after incorporation. And so we worked very hard to kind of minimize the visual impact of it. We understood that people have property rights, but we also understood that these things could be physically imposing on the neighborhood. So we worked very hard to go back into the code and look at what we liked, look at what we didn't like, and make sure that those things fit a little bit better into the neighborhoods. If you look at our institutional neighbors, every single school just about has redeveloped. Right? We've got Betham, you've got Gulliver, you've got Palmetto, you've got all the great schools that have redeveloped. Bet Shirah is next on the list. These things happen. We work with those neighbors to make sure that that redevelopment is in keeping in touch. The point is, you just can't leave this stuff alone and never touch it because it's controversial. We have to look at it, and we have to understand what we like. So what's next? The US1 corridor. The US1 corridor is, for a variety of reasons, poised to redevelop. Right, we've already started to see it happen. We've got the Lexus dealership and Kendall Toyota and those guys that have already redeveloped. You've got shopping centers where Captain's Tavern are in Sunnyland that have already been purchased by new owners. And you have to imagine that when new owners purchase these big giant properties for all that money, that eventually they're going to come in and make an application to redevelop. And I think that it's better that we look at our codes and figure out what we want it to look like in the future, as opposed to them coming in and making a proposal, because our zoning code was built in the 1950s. And I don't think, and this is what we'll confirm tonight, that we're going to want to see a 1950 product come out of the ground in 2021, because it'll be there for 70 years once it does. So as we go forward, what we want to talk about tonight, a lot of this conversation, what are our goals as we go forward? I have personal goals that I strive to. We want to enhance the community character and increase the quality of life for our citizens. That's the overriding goal that we've had that has gotten us to the place where we are today. We want to protect the residential character of the community. I understand that we need to buffer the commercial from the residential much better than what the 1950s style of development has buffered it now. It's noisy, it smells, it's dirty. We need to do that. I think we need to diversify our housing options. The young people can't move into the neighborhood, and the old people can't move out if they don't want to mow an acre worth of land. And what we found through our economic development work is that our citizens need and want, increased options for higher quality shopping, higher quality dining, a better entertainment experience without having to drive to South Miami or Coral Gables or Miami Beach. Maybe there's an opportunity to get a place to enhance Pinecrest's feeling of community. What we didn't know when we started this, but we know now, is we want to limit the county's ability to implement that rapid transit zone corridor unilaterally. And we also, to a certain extent that fits into the character of the community, be supportive of the bus rapid transit system, because we have to be, or we're going to suffocate in this stuff. So let's talk about the rapid transit corridor, because I know there's a little bit of concern about that. The rapid transit corridor is a zoning regulation that was put in place in Miami-Dade County in the 1970s. It was always there to support Metro Rail or whatever type of rapid transit that people, that this county built. In 2017, the county changed those rules and they upzoned their corridor. Now, this rule's in place all over the county in the unincorporated areas. Around the transit stations, they allow between 250 units an acre, between 150 and 500 units an acre. Dade land is built, it's 250 units an acre. 136th Street, where a station would be, is pegged at 150 units an acre. They also then decided to go a half a mile on either side of the corridor in the unincorporated areas and zone up to 60 units an acre. Right, if you put that into Pinecrest, that looks like, I think would have changed our population. If you implemented this whole thing, it would increase our population about 1,000%, which doesn't fit well into the category. So we, as part of the League of Cities and Pinecrest, started to push back on the county in that respect. And so they backed off a little bit. We met with the county commissioner who was proposing this in September, and he made a couple of suggestions. And I think this is almost where it stands now. The suggestions are that they were good with the cities maintaining their autonomy to make the decisions, their own decisions on land use and zoning. But the answer was, you can't do nothing. You got to do something. You need to come up with a base of development that's transit oriented. What that is, I think that's what we work ourselves through. And you can't go backwards. You can't ultimately downzone that, or you would lose your autonomy. And so they started off with those and those parameters, and then they said, okay, we're going to put together a draft ordinance sooner than later. What I've heard, but I can't confirm just yet, is that draft ordinance will probably come out in the early part of 2022. And so you'll likely see it in January. And what I've heard is that all those things stand, and if the cities decide to do nothing, what they'll end up doing is if a developer would come in and make an application based on the county zoning in your city, and if were to get denied, then that denial would be appealable to Miami-Dade County Commission, which is just like taking our authority away from us, because you know that Pinecrest is never going to approve 150 units an acre in anywhere in the village of Pinecrest. And so it would surely get denied. So why do they do this? Because the county's growing, and we are complaining about traffic. The population of Miami-Dade County in 1970 was 1.2 million people. By the time we incorporated, it was 2 million people. Today, it's about 2.7 million people. And in 15 years, it's going to be about 3.3 million people. So the population of South Dade is going to expand by 50%. There'll be 50% more people and 65% more jobs according to the projections. So we need to prepare better. And why does that impact us? Because South Dade is a place where a ton of growth can happen. Right now, it's a giant area. It's 50% of Miami-Dade County's geographic area, but it's only got 25% of the population in Miami-Dade County. So they can stuff a lot of people in South Dade. It's only got 12% of the jobs. So what's happening is that people to go to work drive north of 88th Street every day. About 150 cars drive north of 88th Street every day. And Pinecrest is the last on that list. So we're getting about all of them as they either go up Old Cutler Road or US1. Some of them take the turnpike to get out of town. And if you looked at those projections, that means there's going to be about double the amount of cars on the streets in 15 years. And so they've implemented the bus rapid transit system, right? It's not Metro Rail that many people were clamoring for, but if it was Metro Rail, they wouldn't be asking us for 150 units an acre, they'd be asking us for 250 units an acre, and it wouldn't be a question, they would simply impose it. And that's a $300 million project that is hopefully going to get a significant amount of the extra vehicles off of the roads. And so that's why we're here. I know that took about 7.5 minutes as I timed myself practicing. That's why we're here, and that's why we want to initiate this conversation. The manager's got some comments relative to what we've done since the last plan. Do you want to talk about that? And then what I thought we'd do is just open it up for questions and comments. We can answer every single question you have, and we'll stay here until you're happy that you've been heard and it's been answered, and we'll never stop communicating until we have a plan and you've all seen it and we decide how to go forward.
We had a vision plan that was done for US1 maybe 10 years ago at this point. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
I can't hear you.
Okay, I'll speak as loud as I can. So about 10 years ago, we had a vision plan done for the village. As the mayor was explaining, we went through a whole process where we asked people what they wanted to see in the village. along US1, and a lot of good ideas came out of that process. What we've seen over the course of the last 10 years is some redevelopment and some improvements that you can already see happening in the corridor. Some of the older shopping centers have been redone, more modernized.
Like Gardner's area, the Gardner's.
Right, like where, you know, the Starbucks, Mr. Sue's development redid that one. So you're seeing new improvements, architectural improvements happening along the corridor. What we've done to accommodate that is change some laws. For example, improving our sign code to lower the signs to a smaller to monument signs. But you're still not seeing those things happening because the way we have the code written now, it will only come into effect when there's complete redevelopment happening on a property. So one of the things that the village is going to be considering is how to spur that, how to make that happen faster so that you start seeing some of those improvements that we already have built into the code happen.
What signs? Like street signs or?
No, the monument signs. You know how when you're driving by, if you've gone to other cities, you may have noticed some people have lowered monument signs that you can see at the car level. Right now, ours are huge, you know, 30-foot signs. So dropping the size of those signs, that's one of the improvements we made along the corridor already that we're trying to spur to happen faster. Some of the other improvements that the old vision plan had talked about was pushing the properties closer, you know, the buildings closer to US1 to provide more buffer to the residences that are immediately abutting that to the east. So this here is something that comes straight out of the old vision plan. And what it looks at is exactly that. It's pushing the buildings closer to US1, but to allow more buffer to the rear, which is the residential areas.
So where would people park then?
The parking could be either under buildings or, right, in parking facilities in different locations. So one of the things that I want to stress is that the village is not the developer. Every property owner can have the ability of coming in and pitching an idea. What we do is basically establish minimum standards by which people can build. So when we talk mixed use, that's one of the concepts that we've been asking to get feedback on, is the idea of expanding mixed use that involves residential component along the corridor. Right now, we allow mixed use residential in certain parts only, typically around the existing metro rail stations. So wherever you have an existing metro rail station across the highway, we currently allow mixed use development with residential.
And mixed use, you mean commercial and residential?
Right, retail and residential
In the same building.
in the same building.
And one of the reasons for that is after incorporation, when we were forming our initial comprehensive plan, the state and the county came in and they asked us to support the rapid transit system. And so we worked with the state and the county to develop a land use and zoning category, and it's called the Pinecrest Business Improvement District. And we implemented it across from the Dayland Station in North Pinecrest. That exists already. And for the same exact reasons that the county's got this reason for doing this rapid transit zone proposed.
Right. So when we talk about expanding mixed use, it's looking at different locations that currently don't have that mixed use development. So this map here shows you, and if you can't see it, you're welcome to come up and take a look at it. It shows you the length of the corridor. And what you see here you have what we call the A site plan. That location is the location of the Home Depot site, Macy's, Publix, and Burger King. So it's from 132nd to 136th Street. That's what we call Site A. That property is about 24 acres total, if it's owned by multiple people. Sir, you had a question?
Is that going to be done under eminent domain, or these people want to sell it? Like you talk about Home Depot and the Publix and stuff, do they want to sell
No.
it? Or are they mandating it?
No, there's no talk of eminent domain. That's not, this is,
So it would be up to the owner to sell.
this is up to the owner. In fact, we don't get involved with anything but the underlying rules for the area. If and when an owner wanted to sell, that's their own private business. It may never happen,
Right.
those types of things. So this has nothing to do with any of that.
So if we shoot the plan down, if one of those three doesn't sell, because then it won't have the contiguous properties they need for that.
Well, remember, the plan is the plan. So every property has an underlying land use category and a zoning category. And whether that redevelops or it doesn't redevelop, those are the rules by which it redevelops. So if it never turns over, it never has to build to the new rules. If we didn't change the rules and it turned over, it would build to the old rules. So, right, the plan can go forward without regard to that. It's just when the property redeveloped, it would then have to build to those rules.
Right. So the idea of doing these zoning concepts and talking about it is to try to get gauge from the residents and the folks that use the corridor, what is it that you envision 20 years, 30 years from now? Because nothing that is done now is going to be built overnight. In fact, some of these codes, one of the reasons I mentioned that we did a lot of this 10 years ago, is so that you would understand that in many cases these codes already exist, but if there's no developer that's actually interested in coming and spending the money and investing, it won't happen. So there are rules that are set in books that tell people how high you can go, how far you have to be from the back, you know, from your neighbor, and those kinds of things. That's what the land development code does. So when we look at the vision and trying to dust off the old vision, what we're thinking and the village is considering is, do we expand the mixed-use locations? Like I said, right now, we have some just across the street from the metro stations. The county, if you're not aware, is doing bus rapid transit along the corridor, and they're adding a bus rapid stop at 104th and on 136th Street.
So what are these stops supposed to look like?
So they're going to have stations, like big stations along the busway.
Where's that going? I don't know.
That's going to go, we need the exact location, but it's going to be on the west side of the road, on the county side, 104th Street, 136th Street in Pinecrest.
In along the transit way. So you know where the buses go now, they will be building these large stations where the buses come up with raised platforms and people can get on the bus rapid, you know, the rapid buses there. And it's going to act faster than local bus do now. And so those stations are going, one is on 104th and one is on 136th Street.
Yes,
Yeah.
sir.
So right now, the only, with the current plan the way it is now, the only mixed-use places would be in the areas that are in blue on that map, the ABC, nothing more, is that correct?
Correct. Right now, correct. As the law stands now, our code today allows for a mixed-use development up to 4 stories in the areas that are adjacent to the metro rail stations,
The blue.
the blues.
Yeah.
So you have C and B.
Where are those exactly? Can you, because we can't see them from back here.
Okay, so the current code has the mixed-use development where DSW, Ross, the Dairy Queen is located. It stops right where the apartment buildings are. So one of the things that we're thinking of recommending is expanding it to include those apartments, not the condominiums, the ones, you know, not the condos on 67th, the ones right before
You're
that,
talking about north of Kendall Drive, in other words.
north of Kendall Drive. Site B is the location that gets hugged by the on-ramp. And it's where Captain's Tavern is. There's an office building there and then a bunch of little retail shops. So that's another site. And then I'm sorry? Yeah.
That doesn't include the Trader Joe's site.
No, that does not include the Trader Joe's site. The current code does not include the Trader Joe's site. And neither does the things that we're thinking of recommending to council. Because a lot of these concepts are things that the village staff are working on to then develop and propose recommendations to the council. And then that would come before the village residents at public meetings where you would be able to come and speak on those things but we're still vetting to see if people like the idea, don't like the idea, those kinds of questions. Yeah.
Right, so just to clarify, under the current code, those sites can be up to 4 stories mixed use, including residential?
Yeah, the site that I mentioned,
Like what we were just talking about?
this, yes. Site C.
Only sites.
Site C and Site B allow for 4
Current.
stories. This site doesn't involve all these properties. So in both Site C and B, we're suggesting expanding it. And then Site A, which is the one between 132nd and 136, it doesn't exist now.
Now remember, the height limit is, no matter what, on US 1, it's 4 stories anyway.
Right.
But that includes residential today, somebody could build residential there.
Only
today.
in those areas that have mixed
In
use.
those areas.
But along the entire corridor today, you can build up to 4 stories
Clarify.
Residential.
without residential.
It really, the mixed use with residential in it is only adjacent to the Dayland Station.
It's not in the south already? We have, north, no, the North Pinecrest District is
Those two,
here.
but not what we're proposing, not anything
Not
around the
here.
other stations.
Right.
Because they're not stations.
They're not stations yet, right. So the concept, and I'll take the questions, the concept that we're playing with is, do we take what we already have existing in the north part of Pinecrest, which we call the North Business District, and replicate that same concept in these other station locations, right? You had a question?
Yeah, when you say we're considering expanding the thing, so who's we?
The village.
The village of Pinecrest is considering
The
expanding?
administration, let's get it clear, because that doesn't mean the village. The village is all of us. The administration.
Well, the council, the elected officials, and the village.
No, that's a very good question.
Who's we?
The organization, the village, the government of the village, right, is looking to vet ideas with the
To
residents.
vet ideas, but not to recommend necessarily. that
What
we expand.
happens in the process is we would vet ideas, get input back, and then ultimately staff would develop recommendations for changes to the code. And then those changes would come before the council at a public hearing, at a future public hearing, where everyone would see what the changes are that are being proposed, and then you can speak for or against, and then the village council would eventually make the ultimate decision whether or not to include and make that change in the code.
I don't know who you are, but you're representing the village or the or
The village.
the residents?
I'm the village manager.
Why
You're
do
the
you want to
village manager,
expand?
okay.
If nobody has ever considered
Because the
buying
county's
this
gonna
property,
enforce
what's the
it.
point of expanding?
So one of the things that I don't know if you came in
Shut it down.
after the mayor explained, and I don't know how much, the county is trying to change the code, or at least there's rumors out there that they're gonna come in and force higher development, not just in Pinecrest, but across the county, anywhere along a transit corridor. The densities that the county has been playing and discussing go into 60 units an acre to 150 units an acre.
But remember,
Trying to beat the county to the
well,
punch.
no, there's a variety of reasons we're doing this, and that's one of them that came about later in
our
2021.
process,
What we started this process in January of last year, and because we had a US1 vision plan that we did in 2012. And we try to keep current with the changes. We noticed the shopping centers were turning over, and we wanted to keep ahead of it, so we wanted to revisit that vision plan. So we're looking at that. We're understanding that shopping centers are selling, people are buying them, other uses on US1 are redeveloping. So we want to make sure that the code is still, if they redevelop to that code, it's something we want to see. I had thought about perhaps a diversity in housing stock. Right now, the older folks have a hard time moving out and staying in the community if they don't want to cut the grass anymore, and the young folks have a problem moving in. I thought a better buffer along the US1 corridor between the residential and the commercial would be warranted. A better retail, dining, and entertainment experience on the US1 corridor in the retail places might also be better. And perhaps then the rapid transit zone comes up, so why not push some of the, instead of we've always worried about commercial intrusion into the residential neighborhoods. What about the opposite? What about pushing the residential into the commercial areas in certain places? Those are the reasons that we've approached this.
Right, but to add more, I guess, fuel to the flame is the fact of that the potential that the county can come in and do something even more onerous, right? So that's always in the back of our minds, and the idea is that we want to control our own destinies here. So some of the things that we've heard just back and forth in the prior discussions that we've had, in the prior meetings that we've had, is people definitely do not want to see a repeat of Coral Gables, right? Like what you're seeing with really tall buildings. So we, when I say we, the village staff, because I represent staff, not the elected officials, they're above me. But the village staff is listening, and we're thinking of recommending around 4, staying with the cap of the 4 max, so that the scale stays village. We don't want to get into something that starts looking like Coral Gables. So that's one of the things that I would hope to get feedback on. So the reasons that we have these pictures that we put is to give you an idea, and so we're talking the same language, because when you say mixed use, that can mean a lot of things to a lot of people. Because you can go, for example, to downtown Doral, and that looks a certain way. And so from a staff perspective, what we want to try to make sure that we capture when we redo, if we do recommendations, is a village feel, something that is village scale, that adds to our character, not take away. Kind of like when you go to Key West, you know you're in Key West. There's a feel that's created in the architecture. We want to try to find that language and that architectural language to create more of a village feel in the village, right? But one concern, and I do want to hear back, is we hear a lot, like it turns people off to have the buildings pushed up towards US1. That's definitely one of the concepts that even existed 10 years ago in the old vision plan. And the question I have is that a total turnoff, or do you buy into the concept of pushing those buildings there so that it provides more buffer on the backside to the residential? So that's one thing that as we talk and gather information, if you can address that for yourselves so we can hear back. The other is the concept of having residential mixed use in other locations other than where they already exist. How do you feel about that? So we do want to hear about that. Sir?
Yeah, I have a question. Joe, your previous speech, at the end of your previous speech, you said by having all this residency and higher density, you're going to have less cars on the street. You're not going to have a nice fancy metro rail with Wi-Fi and TVs. You're going to have just buses. So what statistic do you have right now of people, residents in Pinecrest, really taking a bus to the Kendall? I don't think anybody does that.
Well, I think what they've got is they've got a bus rapid transit system that they're building right now, and it functions very much like a metro rail. It's just a lot less expensive and a little bit less capacity.
And
so
you think by increasing the density by 1,000% in the corridor, these people are going to take the bus?
Nobody ever said that we would increase the density by 1,000% in the corridor. The fact of the matter is that if people are going to ride this type of thing, it's usually the person that's very close to it. And so it's to support the rail or the bus, like the rail in other corridors, the bus here, it's better to have people near the infrastructure so that they can use it.
Right. So
Yes, sir,
we
you
do
go ahead.
know,
Okay.
and I will mention, we do know from past surveys that it's very unlikely that that residents from Pinecrest would use the bus.
Yeah.
We know that residents from Pinecrest get dropped off at Metro or take freebie to Metro and then go from there. So that isn't necessarily one of the bigger reasons for doing this. One of the reasons that potentially, right, works is creating what we don't have now. One of the things we hear back all the time is we don't have any place to go have fine dining, nice places where you have outdoor cafes. So that cafe plaza type feel, creating that type of what they call lifestyle center fits with the concept of mixed use. And so the staff would be leaning more towards creating that kind of quality of life amenity addition to the village, but not.
I understand that part, but let's not mix and confuse everybody about the cars off the street that you mentioned. Because I live a couple of blocks from here. None of my neighbors have ever taken a bus, and everybody takes my avenue as a shortcut to get to school or whatever.
Right.
And they almost killed my dog a couple of times and kids and everything. So let's not mix one. I love what you just said, the downtown Doral, you know, and the nice cafes and all that stuff. Beautiful. But that's
Right, well, anytime you create apartments or residences, that will have more population. So you will create more trips, okay? So whether it happens in Pinecrest or anywhere down south, right, Mayor? You can speak to this better than me. That will happen. It will generate, because everybody that comes in, any new population will bring more.
Correct. I mean,
Cars.
the county's going to grow at a certain extent, and if development in the right places will attract people that are going to use the rapid transit. So people that tend to move into Dayland, people that tend to move into those places that are adjacent to the rapid transit, typically use the rapid transit because that's one of the reasons that they're moving in. Let's go to you, then you, then you, then you.
I think reading between the lines that I'm finally understanding where this is coming from, because you as our council, as our
Manager.
when you said we're considering expanding, so I thought, why are we considering expanding? I think the bottom line is that we realize that there is a certain inevitability to some expansion down the road, given the demographics and the features that, and we want to be prepared to forestall the onerous kind of thing and come up with a potential compromise kind of thing that would be somewhat beneficial, as you explained it to us.
Yeah, I think that's very, very much what we're attempting to do. If the world is going to change, we want to be prepared for it, and we want it to change into a form that we're comfortable with, and we don't want it to change into a form that the commissioner from Miami Gardens is comfortable with, because they don't understand what we're comfortable with. So we have to go through these exercises. By the way, we've done these exercises for 25 years, and the place isn't so bad. I mean, you know, we've got a nice character, and we've got a nice quality of life. And so because we get together and do this type of stuff, we're able to get a little bit closer to what we want to see, and again, not what they want to see in Miami Gardens.
Right.
I'm sorry.
No, that's
That's
okay.
right. When you
you're
speak, you can
speaking,
take
it's
the mask
okay.
off. Just
Right.
be careful with one another.
I just want to say, I'm an architect. I've been doing planning for a long, long time. I have a lot of gray hairs to show.
I color
And
mine.
I can tell you that it's great that, for example, Site B is buffered by the expressway.
Right.
Okay, so therefore, there, you could raise the limit. If you have to bargain with the county, you could take that higher than the four floors that you want to go to, because we, as the residents, and I live close by that, by the way, we are buffered by the highway in that area. However, in that Site C, if you take it all the way to Kendall Drive, okay, which is, I believe, where you're taking it to.
Right now, Site C,
Yes.
the current code
The current code stops
only
before.
excludes this,
Correct.
but it takes it to Kendall.
But it takes it to Kendall.
It does
If you
take-
take it all the way to Kendall, all right, all the way at the end of that corner,
Here.
look where you're close to. That corner puts you right in the midst of the very close proximity to the residential.
What's the,
So therefore, if you increase the height on that, in that area there, you will be able to see those buildings,
We're
even
not-
though over the tree lines.
We're not contemplating increasing
Increasing
height.
height. We would leave it at the 4. We're not, so
Well,
right now.
it's not at 4.
It is.
No, it is.
No.
Legally, it's at 4.
I know, but there's no physical
Correct.
construction in it.
But
You
if
can
somebody
build-
were
if
to come
somebody
in,
would
they
apply.
can
The
build
only one that's built at that high is the,
Baptist Medical Center.
what's it?
Baptist Medical Center?
That's 3,
that's not in,
and it's 45, maybe 45
Guys,
feet, but it's 3.
but
Yeah, but the
the
point-
height's 45. The height
Okay,
limit
so
is 45
The
feet.
point that I'm trying to make is that two things. Number one, you can change your plan. Number two, I think you can enforce your plan using your zoning restrictions. And you can do that by creating setbacks that may not be, may not offer a way out if they were to implement the current, the appropriate dimensions. In other words, if you have a site, you want to create a forward set, let's say a setback off US1, you can limit that setback and allow maybe the buildings to come up slight closer to US1, but not too close, because what you don't want to create
Is a canyon.
is the canyon
Right.
effect that we have in Coral Gables. And allow for a restrictive setback from the back to protect the residents.
Right.
And that would work fine.
Yeah,
Right.
that's what we're kind of talking about here, is we understand that even if you didn't put a residential component in there, that you can, again, remember, one of the primary reasons for doing this is always said we don't want commercial intrusion into the residential neighborhoods. So through zoning, we can better protect, put a better buffer, and that mainly is done with height limitations and setbacks.
And the other thing is, you talk about mixed use. Mixed use is not just residential.
Correct.
Correct.
It could be offices.
Correct.
And commercial.
We have
So
commercial
therefore,
mixed
you
use
need-
right now.
You need to make sure.
We
that
have commercial mixed use right now along the entire corridor. What we don't have is residential component along the entire corridor. So that's the distinction, and I'm glad you brought that up.
We're not contemplating a residential component
Along the entire corridor.
Miami-Dade County is, but we are not.
Right.
We've
Because
talked
what
Miami-Dade.
that's going to do, it's going, if you talk about changing the character of the village,
Correct.
that will do it.
Right, right, and that's why we fought with Miami-Dade County to not plan between the stations. Number one, from a transit perspective, residential between the stations doesn't get you any closer to any higher level of rapid transit. That's not how the federal government counts ridership. No, it doesn't count in the federal formula for ridership. The area around the station, a half mile around the station, is what they count for ridership for those rapid transit systems.
For the points.
For the
To
points.
get the grants, because these rapid transit systems cost so much money, they could only actually happen if the federal government invests.
Okay, let me go to you in the back, because you had your hand up a couple times, then you, all right.
Could you tell us who the commissioners are at the county level that are pushing for this high-speed corridor and what areas they represent?
The commissioner that had proposed it is from the north side of the county, Commissioner Oliver Gilbert. Other than that, it hasn't gone to a committee yet, so I'm not quite sure who specifically supports.
Can we get our commissioner to propose something for his city?
Well, look, we've got our county commissioner involved, and our county commissioner has deemed to work with us. What she's proposed is we cut the south corridor out of it, and that we work directly with her to work on whatever transit supportive improvements get made. Their position is, from speaking to them, is both very similar. It's do something, don't go backwards type of thing, and so that's where that stands right now.
I'm good with doing something, I just don't like being forced into it.
And that's what we're working on.
And so, I think you guys should be working with our commissioners to propose stuff for their cities. Perhaps they'll get the message that.
But the something that we want to do, we think, has to be controlled by the village. The something has to be what the village residents want to see there, not them telling us and then forcing our hand.
So let me, before I get to your question, let me take a step back and explain where we came. The rapid transit zone appeared, it came to the Miami-Dade County League of Cities in April. The commissioner put it forward for input. I happen to be the chairman or president of the Miami-Dade League of Cities. We reviewed it, we flagged it, and we got all the other cities on board. We were able to kind of chill it a little bit, and then we started giving updates, not only to all the other cities, but updates to our citizens in our council meetings in April. I think that's had a very positive effect on this. We were able to kind of stop it where it was, get into conversations not only with the county commissioner that proposed it, but all of the county commissioners in our area that we have good relationships with. So this is an ongoing conversation. We're talking, we're monitoring it with our legal people and our planners on a very regular basis. We'll know if anything moves. So this is something that not only were we aware of it first, we found it out. Let me go to you, sir.
Okay, can I approach the map?
You bet.
Absolutely.
Okay. I just want to clarify, when you say expansion of what's existing today, I just want to be clear. Right now, Zone C, which is across from Dadeland North, that's Dairy Queen, DSW, Ross, That is zoned today, and if somebody bought that property, it could go up to 4 stories, and it could include residential.
Yes.
Same for Site B?
No.
Except for these
For this-
apartments, the apartments, not the condos, because there's the condos that are right on 67 and right behind
Tell us
that.
what streets you're talking about.
So-
Be more specific.
It's 60, okay. And I apologize because this is very small.
Yeah.
This here is right across Gulliver. It's where Ludlam comes in and curves, and this intersection is Kendall.
That's the condo
So
area.
these are the condominiums.
Daylight Village.
Yes, just west of that, there are currently apartment buildings that exist, right? That area, and there are only 2 stories. Those are the rentals, they're not condos, they're just rentals. So the expansion would include that property, because currently that property is not in the North District.
So the CVS is right up the street there.
The CVS is right here.
Okay.
This is the street, this is the corner where Dairy Queen is, right? This
Dairy
is the
Queen-
street that's to the side,
Dairy
DSW.
Queen is right here,
Right, this is the old dealership, the old Mitsubishi
the
dealership.
Mitsubishi dealership, right? So that's already all included. I'm sorry?
Where's the old Toys R Us on there?
The
Right
old,
near the side of the
Toys R
town.
Us is outside of the village limits. It's not inside, it's north, it's up here.
Okay.
Right, so that's outside of the village limits,
So
okay?
just to clarify, Site C, except for this little bottom portion,
Already
could
exists.
already go up to 4 stories and include residential.
Correct.
Site B could go up to 4 stories and already include
And,
residential.
and the site where Roasters and Toasters is, already is part of the North Pinecrest District.
So the expansion that we're talking about is just expanding it for this little strip on the bottom to be consistent with what's in the rest of Site C.
Correct.
And then add Site A with that same type of zoning.
That's correct. That's one of the ideas we've been thinking of.
What about 104th Street where they're going to put the bus
So
station?
104th Street has not been discussed yet. Behind the scenes, I could tell you staff has thought of it because it's technically what the county would like to see is a hub at every station. On 104th, the issue is that you have Keck South and that the properties there are really thin. So you can't, it's not deep enough. So the only place conceivably that you could potentially do something is if you went north of 104th to the Anthony's pole, that right now you have the Chase Bank, and then you have some office buildings right behind that, right before the Flagler Grove Park. But right now, that hasn't even been pitched. So if you like the idea, we'd like to hear back, because I guess that's something we would take.
So the reason I asked the question is because there's a lot of noise about bringing residential to the corridor. But the fact that there is no mixed-use residential today in Site B and this part of Site C, that could happen today. Nothing needs to
Yes,
change.
nothing needs to change
So
there.
all we're talking about is just expanding to this little piece
And bringing
then
it to
Site
that
A.
other site further south.
Thank you.
Why did that happen?
Correct.
Hold on, wait, let's go orderly. Somebody else had their hand up. You go ahead, and then we'll get back.
If you allow these mixed-use development areas, I mean, do you have any evidence that this will actually increase the ridership on these buses? I mean, or is that just an assumption that if you allow these developments to go ahead, that people will use that corridor? Because I'm thinking these developments are going to be fairly high-end, and I'm not sure those people are going to ride a bus even to get to Little.
Right.
Is there any evidence that around the Kendall or the Bayline station, that those high-rises have increased the ridership, or, you know, do you have any statistical evidence? to show?
Yeah, I think it's pretty well accepted that density around transit stations in that proximity increases ridership, and that's not something typically the transportation planners debate. That's why they draw the mile radius. So
Have they done any surveys to actually see if that's in fact the case? Of what happened?
it's yeah. I mean, there's a whole body of data industry-wide that the federal government uses to
Joe,
program.
you're wrong. Joe, you're wrong. That could happen in home, it's not gonna happen in Pinecrest with the property values, with the taxes. Nobody can afford a property, even if it's a condo in a 4-story high, and take a bus. That's not gonna happen. We all know that.
Well, I'm not going to debate it with you because you know we've got to have a common set of facts.
So my
That's a
question
fact.
is, why hasn't anybody developed those areas that are already approved?
Bingo.
I'm not.
Bingo.
Ma'am, you had a question?
Yeah, I wanted to ask, this is, and I maybe a closer to ideal scenario for the village of Pinecrest.
I agree. But I don't think that's anywhere near what the county really wants to do along that corridor.
Right.
What is the reality of what they really want to do?
Oh, the county wants to do, like I told you, the county has said that anywhere there's a transit station, the density should be between 150 and 500 dwelling units an acre. And in between the transit stations, a half a mile on either side of the corridor, the density should be 60 units an acre. So no, this is nothing like the county has proposed. But again, working our way backwards with the commissioner that's proposed this, he has agreed to leave us alone in between the stations, right? That's, number one, that's a fact that it doesn't contribute to ridership in between the stations, at least from the formulaic perspective of the federal government. Number two, yeah, everybody, all the professionals who agree, yes, the areas around the stations contribute to ridership, but as I've told them, Pinecrest can't tolerate 150 units an acre. It's just never going to happen in Pinecrest. We'll never approve it.
That's like Singapore.
Well, you say that they can override it.
Yeah, they have the legal right to impose this.
How does one commissioner have the power to blackmail the entire
Well,
county?
that's not the whole. Everything starts with a proposal. The commissioner is going to eventually put this to a committee, and it's eventually going to go to the county commission for a vote. Now remember, we're in a county that has extraordinary traffic problems, and us, right here in this room and all down the corridor and all across Miami-Dade County have been screaming for rapid transit, right? Metro rail, in fact, Metro rail. And we didn't get the Metro rail. But every other corridor, 9 corridors, it's a $9 billion effort that they don't have the money to fund. Right? The only way to get the money from the federal government perspective is to put the density in the corridor. So what these elected officials keep hearing is, you all have been complaining for Metro Rail for 40 years.
They're creating the demand. There is no demand, and they're creating the scenario that will put them in the situation that they want to be. That's number one.
Yes.
And number two, we had a meeting with our commissioner from Dade County, and Raquel Regalado, and she said that each commissioner is allowed to not accept the proposal in their area, and that she does not plan to accept the proposal. Whether she was lying or telling the truth, God knows.
She said the same thing to us. She wants to cut us out.
So how does one commissioner, Gilbert, have the power to change all our lives? Now, if we want to rezone stuff to make it prettier, that's one issue. But this demand of increasing density to a ridiculous amount, we cannot handle.
Right.
And you know what? None of us moved to Pinecrest because we wanted to be in high density.
Right.
We're
None
not-
of us paid the prices that we pay in
Right.
Pinecrest because we wanted to be high density.
So I don't know what the other commissioner is going to vote for, but they all voted to put this in place in the unincorporated areas just 4 years ago. So this zoning exists at 130th Street, 3rd Street west
On the west
of
side.
Pinecrest. This zoning at 60 units an acre exists at 112th Street west of Pinecrest. This zoning exists in the unincorporated areas a half a mile from every transit corridor in the county. So I would imagine, since they already did it, they would do it again. So ma'am, and then you.
So yeah, the other question that I have that's not really being mentioned is that, yes, they want the increased, homes or apartments, whatever, but they're not mentioning, maybe because they don't want to, but it also has to be a different type of residence. Because just like the gentleman said back there, if it's a higher cost residence, that person who buys it or rents it is very unlikely to take the public transportation system unless they're a lawyer and they have to go to court, like I've done when I have jury duty.
Right.
I live here, that's the only time I use it. Or they work downtown, don't want to pay the parking, or they want to go to Brickle parking and don't want to, have to worry about their cars. So there's an unspoken reality here about all these numbers that they want of housing that they want to put in there, is that it's really going to change the landscape of the area because it's completely different.
Well, I think the fact is that if you looked at employment statistics in South Dade, most of the people, again, 150,000 people, I think we have 200,000 workers in South Dade, and 150,000 of them, right, drive outside of South Dade every morning. So that's 3/4 of everybody that leaves the community. Where do they work? they work in South Miami, they work in Coral Gables, they work in Miami, they work on Miami Beach, and they work in Doral primarily. So all of those, South Miami, Coral Gables, Miami, and Miami Beach, are connected to the rapid transit system. So it's highly plausible that all of those people can get on the bus rapid transit, transfer to the rail, and get to work. And that's, so that is that. Somebody else had a question?
I think the gentleman over here had one.
Well, no, he's done it 3 times, so let me
Mayor,
go
if I could
you,
just
and then you.
also, real quick, interject. So you have the county noise and what they're obviously trying to do countywide. But what I still want to stress to everybody is that what staff in the village is wanting to do has that in the back of our minds, but that's not really the real reason for doing this.
That's not why we started this.
That's not why we started this. We're looking at the corridor to create placemaking and add something to the village that doesn't exist now, right? That we believe, because over time we've heard, people want to see more restaurants, open plaza, cafe, open areas, and a different kind of development than just the strip malls.
That's right. Okay, so I'm not going to cut anybody short. I just want to go in order so I make sure that everybody speaks. So you, and then back to you.
Okay, so I came in late and I'm getting, am I right that has this gone now, this commission ordinance, is it going before the county?
No. It has not moved forward. We've heard, the commissioner has told us that we'll move forward sooner rather than later, and I've heard but not confirmed that he's planning on moving it forward very shortly. I would assume early part of 2022, but I haven't confirmed that yet, but it just goes to show you we're watching it every day.
Okay, so it's not, it's getting closer from going to a proposed ordinance to actually.
Yeah, it's getting
Just so that
closer.
I understand.
It's getting closer to becoming something that is a real proposal. Right now, it's an idea.
Right.
It's theoretically been modified, but we've seen no written modifications of it. If it goes forward, it will get written down in whatever form it's proposed. It'll go to a committee at Miami-Dade County, and it will then pass out of that committee, eventually wind up on a county commission agenda, and get voted on.
But we're not there yet. It's
We are not
on
there
the
yet,
agenda.
but I
All
have
right.
a feeling we're going to be there very shortly, and again, so we want to be prepared.
And then,
One more,
the
go ahead.
second part.
Let's go.
Just, how much of a threat with what the county is imposing to increase the density for the RTZ? Is it to the municipalities on the corridor, specifically for Pinecrest?
Well, I think that any threat that somebody makes to take our authority away from us needs to be taken very seriously, and that's what we're doing. So, you know, look, we have one county commissioner down. Look, this proposal was a half mile on either side of the US1 corridor all the way down to Florida City. The county commissioner down in Homestead on the west side proposed 5 miles on either side of the US1 corridor. So that would effectively, believe it or not, from Elliott Key to the Everglades would have basically been under the zoning of Miami. So you never know what's going to happen, but I think that generally what I hear is people want the cities to maintain their authority, but they want the cities to support the rapid transit. And to a certain extent, we have the responsibility to support the rapid transit. This rapid transit in South Dade is a $300 million project. The Trump administration gave us $100 million. The DeSantis administration gave us $100 million, right? And locally, we paid $100 million for it. And we've been complaining for 4 decades about rapid transit. Finally, they've given us rapid transit, and to a certain extent, within the character of the Pinecrest community, we have the responsibility to support the rapid transit system. I just don't see how we can live in a society in Miami-Dade County and just put a wall around us and say, no, we're not going to participate in a $300 million project. And they won't let that happen. So in that sense, we need to do something or not. So you had a question, then with you, and then back to you.
So on Site C, which is Dairy Queen.
Right.
Okay, so the rapid transit, the Metro Rail has been there probably 10 years.
More.
Okay.
Yeah, 50 years.
Okay, 15 years.
25 years.
25 years.
1983 it started.
Okay, so if a developer wanted to be able to make money with regards to residential with the zoning that we have of 4 stories and 45 feet, then that developer would have said, okay, I'm going to buy that because it's here where it's already zoned and I'm going to develop it. Evidently, no developer has come up and said, I'm going to take the money out of my pocket and I'm going to build over there because I'm going to make a lot of money. But whatever I've heard is that Zone C, which is Home Depot, which is 24.63, thank you, 24.63 acres, at 150 per, what would it be, 100 or 150 apartments per?
For the village?
For the village.
Oh, no.
Village, we are not.
So you want to say 60?
No.
You want to say 25?
But it will be 500 apartments if that zoning is changed in siting. So that was gonna be my next question. Let's say you change the
Hold on, let him.
All right, all right.
He can corollary.
Okay.
So I'm thinking of the numbers. So I am about progress and I'm about beautification, but I'm thinking about numbers. So if we change multiple areas to include the residential, we're looking at least probably adding 1,000 apartments.
Hold on. Why would you say that?
Because the current zoning allows a certain amount per acre. So based on the acreage of these lots, let's hypothetically say it could be anywhere between 500 to 1,000 apartments.
I don't know, we would back into that number once we figure out once we had a proposal, we'd be able to back into
With all
that.
due
So
respect,
it's
if I
really
can just finish my
hypothetical.
thought. So if we, let's just say on site A, if we have 500 apartments, we're looking at a minimum probably about 1,000 additional residents. That's an increase to our residency of about 6%. So for me, I'm just thinking, number-wise, how will we limit that as we go? And my other concern is the bait and switch that you see so many developers do where they say, okay, well, we're going to do mixed use, and then it's going to be like this, and it's going to be beautiful, and then all of a sudden it changes, well, we changed our mind, and it's all going to be residential.
Well,
and I know that's something you got to cross later, but that is on people's minds.
So the way that works is, I wouldn't deal in the hypotheticals right now, because if we decide to move forward, eventually we will have a plan on which math can be done. It will have some parameters to it, and you'll be able to tell the acreage, the number of units, and the number of people. So that can all be done. No sense in speculating on it now, because now if anybody ever has tried to develop in Pinecrest, you would understand that we are no picnic to deal with, right? We have a zoning code. We adhere to the zoning code ferociously, right? It's very difficult to get a variance out of the village of Pinecrest. So to think that a developer is going to come to Pinecrest and somehow take advantage of us and then bait and switch us, that is never going to happen. It's not happened up until now, and I don't think it's ever going to happen. Now, that being said, we've always been on top of our zoning code. We created a lot of it when we incorporated, and that's been the reason we've been able to adhere to the rules so well, because we've got a new code, we think about it every year, and when a developer comes in, we're able to say no variances because we're comfortable with this code. It's not a broken code, it's not a code that we ignore so that it's 50 years old, and we're not sure if we want this or don't want it. And this is part of that process to evaluate the code, so when these places do come in, like the Lexus that's already done and going through the process, like the Captain's Tavern site, like the Sunnyland site that have already changed ownership, right? And they're going to want to come in for development, that we know what we want. And then we allow them to do what we want, not allow them to do what they want unless it coincides with our vision. That's the planning process we're going through now. And you had it.
And if I could just interject something that I want everybody to understand. Some of these properties that we're talking about have multiple property owners, right? So what happens when a developer comes in, they may or may not be able to buy all those properties and consolidate. Like right now, we know, and we've heard rumors, but we don't know because they haven't come in yet, that the Captain's Tavern site, that there's a group that's trying to consolidate all those properties. You have, I think, 4 different property owners there, right? Whether that actually comes to fruition or not remains to be seen. So again, these are minimum standards. When you talk land development regulations, you're basically trying to set the minimum standards to control what may happen, but there's no guarantee that it will, because if nobody comes with the money and doesn't want to spend the money, it's not going to be built. We'll continue to have what's there, right?
But if I may finish. So in regards to A, the whole thing seems to be centered on the Home Depot to change it because it's a 25-acre site that would be easy to knock down and to make something else.
Wait a minute, let me stop you, let me correct the record. No, the whole reason is because it's around a transit station.
But what you're looking to do is put all of the responsibility of the rapid transit systems, residential supply in the Pinecrest responsibility, and let it be to the Falls. Let it be to the Samurai.
The Falls, right now, they changed the rules at the Falls. So the Samurai and the Falls and whatever the grocery store is down there is zoned at 150 units an acre.
So why do we have to change? If the submission of the supply is provided on the west side of the road, maybe
Because
what the residents...
the county drew a circle.
I got that.
Okay.
I got the circle.
But circles are round, and they have two sides to them, and we're on one side.
I know, but if the supply is being provided by the county
That's
side...
not being provided. It's only one half of what they want on the county side. They want Palmetto Bay to pick up 150 units an acre. They want Pinecrest to pick up...
So then why don't we put together a resolution? You've got 6,000 homes in Pinecrest. Why don't we put together a resolution and say if everybody puts together $100, that's $600,000. If everybody puts together $200 a home, it's $1.2 million. And why don't we hire a good attorney firm to be able to support what we want? $200 a person?
Well, I have got a good attorney firm that works for the village that gave us a legal opinion that the county has every right to do this if they want. So, next question.
Spend that money getting somebody elected to the council. That's what we should do.
Excuse me?
Get that money spent on getting somebody elected to the county council.
Okay.
So that it's paid
Because
by...
Regalato's not doing what we want.
No, wait a minute, no. Look, our county commission, look, we don't
Nobody's
know.
doing it all the time.
Let our county commissioner has done well by us. Don't tell her, just don't say she's not doing what she wants. She's supportive of what we want to do.
What did she do to Kings Creek?
So Joe,
I don't know about that. I live in
another
Pinecrest.
council.
Hold on. I'll get to you. Let me go here.
Cables.
Let me go here, and then I'll go to you. We'll hash this out. Go ahead.
Question.
Yes.
Do any of the proposals at the county level or what's being contemplated at the village incorporate any requirements or set-asides for affordable or workforce housing?
Yes. Not in anything that staff is
Speaking for
providing.
myself, I would be supportive of increasing density if it's for affordable and workplace housing. So we
That's
can have
exactly what we don't want.
Teachers, our firefighters,
That's exactly what we don't
service
want.
workers being able to live and benefit from the rapid transit. I think higher density. Excuse me.
Let him talk. Hey, look, guys. Wait a minute. Hold on. I'll let you go in a second. Look, we're here to flesh out the ideas, and somebody's going to have a comment, and it's a valid comment. But we're here to listen. This is what we do. We're listening.
What I see as missing from the village and from the broader Miami-Dade community in general is affordable workforce housing that's close to rapid transit, and that I think would move the needle on improving the transit situation. I agree with this lady and others who have said adding more expensive condos with people who don't use rapid transit doesn't make sense to me. So I was wondering if there's any contemplation of having
For
some
definition's sake, because there's a lot of things that people associate, just like when you say mixed use, different people have different ideas of what that means. So when you match the word affordable and workforce housing, a lot of people from the reactions are thinking low-income housing or that sort of thing. So for the purposes of everybody understanding from a planning perspective, when you say workforce housing, you're talking about providing some housing that would likely be affordable to a teacher, a firefighter, somebody who's not, a millionaire, somebody that doesn't make six figures, but somebody that likely would make around $60,000, $75,000 a year, right? That's what is defined as workforce housing. We don't know because we're not the developer. What the village would do is establish minimum space requirements, for example, where we would say, and I'm just throwing this out there, minimum 1,000 square feet. We wouldn't allow a unit to be less than that, right? That's where we would how we would set parameters. Now, whether or not a developer comes in and they come to buy the property, and the property is a $30 million property, and the only way that they can afford to redevelop is to do high end, you know, like the condos in Sunny Isles Beach where, you know, 2,000 square feet is $1 million. Like, we don't know, because that's for the developers to decide.
But don't they get a tax, I think there's a tax incentive for those developers that...
Well, we don't have any rules yet. What a city can do is specify.
We as the village would have the
We
opportunity
can,
to
yes.
include some set-aside requirements
we-
if there's development.
We could do that. We could put in a caveat that says X percent needs to be workforce housing.
And,
We
with
could
all
do-
due respect, I thought it was already in the ordinance, it's also part of our master plan.
We don't have an ordinance.
There is no
part of our
ordinance.
master plan to have a certain percent of affordable housing. It's in our master plan and it is in the ordinance of the county, so I don't.
Oh, in the county, but
don't-
nothing.
we
The
don't-
county, it is in our master plan as well, from my recollection, a certain percentage of affordable housing will always be made available. So I don't think it's fair for people to think that we don't have control over that or we don't know. It is written
No, if
in
you
there.
got, what I just said was, we have absolute control over that. If we want to, we can put a caveat like that into our zoning code.
Right.
That's what I said. I
We
didn't
can
give
do
anybody.
it,
If
it's
you have
not
the impression
part
that
of the
we said it's not we're in control of it, you have the wrong impression. Sir, I've been made you wait.
Yes, of course.
You made mention of the roaster and
Louder,
toaster.
louder.
He's saying that I made mention of the roaster and toaster
Roaster and
property.
toaster property.
Right.
What is the zoning there currently?
That is part of the North Pinecrest Business District. It currently allows mixed-use residential on that property.
So basically, it's not only site B, there would be an adjacent
This already
site.
exists.
Right.
Right.
I understand.
Right,
So
There is no change
there is
proposed for
that site.
correct.
Does it go all the way to 72nd Avenue?
No, it's just that.
Just that shopping
property.
center?
Right.
And what is, if in fact that was to stay the way it is,
Mm-hmm.
and the reason I'm making mention of this is that that site abuts the residential
Yes.
district right behind the wall.
Yes, in fact,
And so,
I think John
that
is right
being the
here.
case, would there be an adjustment to that site to maintain or reduce the height?
We would be looking at potentially changing the setbacks, right, to give more buffer with residential.
There's not enough
rear.
space. There's not enough space. If you look at, and that's the reason why I asked about Trader Joe's. Trader Joe's is right adjacent to that site.
Yeah, but that Trader Joe's is not currently part of the district, right?
If you look at that site and you look at this map, you can see the backyards to all these houses.
Yeah, yeah.
All right? So what are you talking about in terms of setback? If you change that, if a developer came and bought that, and let's say that, and I'm going to give you an assumption,
Hypothetical,
okay,
right.
and a hypothetical. If that developer came in and said exactly what that young lady over there said, that the county is going to give them an incentive to provide low-income housing, all right, and he's going to develop it to the max. That's going to be a problem for that site. Not this one, because this one is buffered from the street by the road. But it may be also a problem for site A.
Yeah, so what we're trying to do, right, is interfere with that, because, right, if the county had their zoning a half a mile around Dadeland Station, the height limit is unlimited, and the density is 250 units an acre, right? So we don't want them, right, obviously, to put that in
I
Pinecrest.
understand you're trying to stay up in front. I understand that. And I also understand that there is a credit point system by which they calculate how much money an area is going to get for that development of that transit station. I get it. I worked in the rapid transit station system that we currently have. I was the one that was in charge of the entire project for the station right north of the downtown government center. So I understand how this works. I'm just questioning the impact that it may have. We have to be very careful of how this is all managed. There are restrictions that you can place zoning-wise that will reduce or force the developer to stick to those restrictions.
And that's what we're trying to do, right? So that's why we have this conversation in the first place, because we can, I've spent my entire elected career working with John Steinbauer on exactly that property, and John taught me the absolute thing that we live by: no commercial intrusion into the residential area. With zoning, you can get a better buffer between. I've spent time in his backyard watching, I don't know, John, how many, with all types of crazy stuff happen at that shopping center, and the noise, and the late night stuff, and this trash that comes over the wall or whatever. And yeah, that part of this, forget the rapid transit stuff, because it's relatively new to the conversation. The concept when we started was to put a better buffer between the residents to the east and the commercial buildings. And in my urban planning mind, you could do that with setbacks, right? By pushing the buildings one way or the other, or step backs and all types of those types of things. That's what we really came here to talk about. And then they threw a shoe into the middle of it with the rapid transit zone, and now we've got something even more sinister to deal with. All right, somebody else had a question.
But if I could just redirect and kind of try to get feedback from folks on the idea of creating these, like a lifestyle type center where you have mixed use with residential, for example, at the site that's down south. Like, what is the gut feeling of folks? Because we get people that hate the idea, and some people that think, okay, if it looks a certain way, that's why we provided pictures to kind of give ideas of what staff was thinking and what direction we were going in. Like, if it's something you hate, I want to hear it. If it's something you kind of like, then we're still flushing out what we're going to be recommending to council. But I do want to hear, you know, those things, because that's where we're leaning towards. When I say we, the staff is coming into council with those ideas.
With residential.
For those particular properties.
Hold on, let me ask her, and then I'll get to you.
Two things. One is the density.
Right.
And two, parking. What happens to the parking? Because if you move the building forward and you put the parking in the back, isn't the noise the same for the residents?
So we require parking underneath, underground. If we said, what was the other question?
Don't do underground.
Well, I'm just throwing ideas out, right? Like, how do you deal with
Parking
it?
somewhere else? No.
Or you can
I
have,
want to go to Publix or to a grocery store and then have to walk 5 blocks to get to a parking
right.
lot.
Or you can have a development, I'm just throwing ideas out, right? So now I'm going to kind of answer questions, but throwing ideas to see how you guys feel about it. You could have a development where you have, you know, a garage, parking garage adjacent, like tied to everything, and you would have, instead of flat surface garages, you would have, you know, that type of system where you have one floor that maybe is residential, not residential, I'm sorry, parking. You know, commercial on the first floor, parking on the second, and then residential on the top two, for example. Those kinds of ideas.
Let me throw a crazy thought. Now, you thought you disagreed with me before? Wait till you hear this one. Residential generates less traffic, less automobile trips than commercial. Just food for thought. Before you shoot me, go ahead.
No, I was talking with her. What's the density? Where are these kids going to school? Our schools are already over full. What do you say? You can live in Pinecrest, but the kids can't go to Pinecrest schools?
Okay, let me explain that to you. So we don't know what the density is. Typically, I think we could likely get away with, we have in our comp plan, we got the county to approve, I want to say in 2017, a caveat on our comp plan that agreed the transit-oriented density was between 7 and 25 units an acre or something like that. Where would they go to school? The county has a thing called concurrency. And what they do is they make sure that the infrastructure is in place at the time of development. And so they measure all these things like schools, and if the area needs additional student stations, then they charge the applicant for it. So theoretically, they're keeping pace with the population growth.
It's supposed to work that way.
Yeah, it's supposed to work. So, sir, in the back, you had a question?
Is this part of the charrette that was done just for that site, or is that to be done? Because it seems like a small site that they could, like a downtown Pinecrest.
Which one?
That site.
This site is a 20.
Home Depot site.
This site
Yeah.
is not just Home Depot, it's
No,
where
that's
the Publix is, and everything. That's a
Isn't
total,
that
I think it's
small?
24, 25 acres. It's
Seems kind of small
similar.
to make it that.
It's similar to Meisner Park in West Palm, in Boca. So that the acreage is comparable to a Meisner Park,
Okay, including the parking?
including parking. So if you, in fact, we've taken Meisner Park and like plopped it on this property to see how it would lay out, and you could literally take that concept and put it here. What?
Depends on if you want an amphitheater. Yes.
Okay. I guess that there was a gentleman that was on one of the previous Inspire Pinecrest, and he mentioned something that I thought was really smart. If we agree to density, depending on the number of units for the multi-use, how many, when would that potentially change when we're voting locally and impact our from single-family homes to multi-use residential? Are they going to be rentals? Are they going to be purchases?
We don't know that.
First off, we're not ever going to touch a single-family neighborhood and change it to this.
No, that I know, but if we had 3,000 residents.
So what would happen, when would it be approved is your question?
No, how could that potentially impact any future meetings when we're talking about what we want to do with Pinecrest?
Oh, I know what she's talking about.
I'm trying to understand what your question is.
I understand the question.
Right,
So the question she's asking, let me see if I could, by adding more population, the concern was that those people, whoever they may be, may have an impact on how the village is governed, right? So the answer to that question is whether they are rentals or whether they are condos, which we wouldn't have control over, right? It would be the developer to make that decision. Whoever lives in those locations, if they are registered voters, will have a say on who gets elected for office in Pinecrest, just like you do. And they would be able to come to any meeting and voice their concerns as you do now. Just like currently, the folks that live in the rental apartments, right, off of Kendall can do that. So the fear, and I understand the concern, is like, how can this change? It can. It can. There's no way of us knowing who may or may not move into the village.
It's not even who is moving in. It's that their living situation, their reality, what they like, what they don't like, is going to be very different from living in an apartment space to living on the pieces of land that we have where we like to
It's
stay.
different. It's a different housing experience. So I can tell you, because I worked in Doral, I was the first city manager in Doral. And when I became the city manager in Doral, they were newly incorporated, and we had, the Cadena group and the Pino group come in with these big development ideas, right? In those cases, the city had just become a city, they didn't have zoning, and the developers were coming in with all the bells and whistle ideas and pitching that, right? And what the city ended up doing was then changing the codes to accommodate those developments and those ideas. This is not that process. This is the opposite. This is trying to maintain control, right, and what we can, knowing that in the future, this is likely what's going to happen countywide because we're just growing. There's a lack of housing in the county. There's all these issues that are pushing, different forces pushing for change. And the idea then is, do we want to have these lifestyle centers? Who the people are going to live there, I don't know. We think, we hear from some of the elderly community that lives here currently that they don't want to continue to live on acre lots and they want to downsize but still stay in the community, right? We hear parents of kids that are in college age that would like their kids to live near them, and the closest is Dayland, but they may not want to live in these big high rises, right? And they might just want to have a different housing opportunity. I don't know. We don't know the answers to those questions and who would live there and how it would be developed.
John?
Excuse my voice, it's kind of patchy. I've been going through this, I lived behind Dayland Plaza for 40 years. That's when this all started. The county at that time wanted 50 units to the acre to 72nd Avenue. Remember where the horse farm was, everybody? Yeah. Guess what's there now? These are all half-acre estate, $2.5 to $3 million homes. That would have impacted that area. Right now, we're talking about what's going to happen with the city and not the county, and I don't believe, I'd be very surprised, especially if we all get together and this thing actually comes to pass, which I doubt, that they want, a half a mile on either side. They can have their half mile over on that side, which, by the way, is the place to put multifamily, even though I'm right across from one that's going up about 12 stories right now. But it doesn't bother me. Access to the Metro Rail, unless they put bridges for the pedestrians, is worthless. And we really don't need those folks getting off Metro Rail coming into our area. I mean, we don't need that element that we're all worried about from time to time. We don't need that in our backyards, okay? So when we put in, and I know the area right behind us is possibly going to be business with a story of residential maybe, because I think that's in the plan. So that's okay, but we got to keep it minimal residential. And I'll probably not be here 10 years from now for
we hope you are, John.
But I think we need to concentrate on stopping them, the county, from trying to put 50 units or 40 units to the acre here, because we don't need that kind of population. And it's really, Joe, I know you want to support Metro Rail, but I'm probably only one or two of the people that do support Metro Rail, because I can walk to Metro Rail, and I never had any problem with it. So I think we need to kind of tone it down a little bit. Understand that if we do it in a proper way and stop the county from doing any more of that business 40 years ago that they tried to impose on our property, and then maybe for the homes that are behind the commercial areas, add a little density to them, maybe triplexes or something, so there's a buffer and duplexes and then single family. And I think if we set that up in our pattern, we'll see that this will substantially help our community and keep what the county has in mind. Again, for example, where Captain's Tavern is, there's really nothing to go to Metro Rail. If you think about it, I mean, where are they going to walk? I mean, they're going to walk 2 miles down to 104th, or go up to that station. So everything should be told to the county. You got people next to the Metro Rail. Use it. They don't need us to provide 50 units to the acre here. And I think it'll all work out. And if we get behind the mayor and our staff, I think we can do something very good for this community and make a little more pleasant area for everybody.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. You, sir.
If I
Let her
real
finish her
quick,
statement.
one of the things, because everybody's talking about densities, like we're not, right, at this stage, we're not even thinking that, but the current zoning allows a maximum of 25 units per acre. My gut, based on discussions, is we don't go beyond that, right? That would be staff's recommendation going to council. We would try to keep it at the 4 and 25. Definitely no more than 30, 35. That would be staff's recommendation to council. They would have to deliberate and then count. Obviously, at public hearings, people can speak, but that's what my gut tells me based on hearing different people, that people would be okay with that. Some people I know hate the idea of residential, I know. I got you, I know Mr. Pano, but if we're gonna move in that direction, that's how I read the people, is that keep it, under control. And that's where we're heading to.
I haven't heard anybody want residential.
Here we go.
Mixed use, yes, but residential.
I'll speak for residential. I think, from my perspective, we are part of a broader Miami-Dade community, which I think we all recognize as an affordable housing and transit problem. And that impacts not just the people who live out there, wherever those elements may be. It affects people who live and participate in our village. I'm talking about our first responders, our teachers, our service workers. Those are the people who I see are commuting an hour and a half each way, each day, to be part of our lives and contribute to our community. So I think if we're
Let him talk, please.
There's no guarantee about anything.
Let him finish his statement, please.
And that's the problem.
That's why, for me, the priority
You get to
would
talk.
be, I agree 100% that we should retain our control of our community, and I think it's incumbent upon us to dictate the requirements. For me, a requirement that would be important for me is to see if we're going to develop and bring more residential and more density, it's for a purpose, not to build more million-dollar condos, not to bring density to make some developer rich. It's to solve the problem that we're trying to solve, which is a housing and transit problem for the people we live and work with.
Yes, and so hold on. Just to answer that question, that's right. And when we started out, why would we do this? When I said it, none of those things were to bring density to the community. None of those things were anything but other things. Buffer the residential areas, provide a better experience for the Pinecrest Diner, provide a higher quality of life. So we have reasons why we're contemplating this, and you're exact, and that's the way we're going to go. Let me go to you.
Just to finish my thought.
Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
Because I think there's two components. When we're talking about mixed use, it's the residential, but I think it's also the commercial. What I would not like to see is a Meisner Park or a Marriage Park or a downtown Dadeland with high-end retail that we can travel 5-10 minutes to go see. I think we all appreciate the small business environment that we've cultivated here. I don't want to see that pushed out with expensive development.
We get mixed signals on that one, and I'd like to hear a little bit more on that particular, because we have heard that some people do want to see higher end, fine dining experiences, more of that cafe feel. So as you answer, like, give me feedback on that.
With luxury, if you're talking about.
He was yelling at me.
They won't come.
Let him finish yelling at me.
No, there's a lot of things that you all haven't even gotten out of these people, that we're supposed to be working with them. They're not working with us.
Who?
And the county.
Yeah. Well, no, they are.
No, they're not. No, they're not. Why don't they come to you and give you an exact amount of population increase that they want to see here along the.
They have. It's like 1,000% of Pinecrest population.
Right. It would increase our population to
And you
175,000.
consider that legitimate?
What does it matter if I consider it legitimate? It's the proposal. I mean, it's just math. It doesn't matter if I
And
consider
then
it
where are you
legitimate.
going to put all those cars?
We don't want them. Wait a minute. So we've been here for months.
I don't believe that. You've been working with the transportation people for how many years?
30?
30. This was all part of your doing too. And every time you put in more density, what happens? We don't have enough ridership.
Wait a minute.
No.
We are
And how are
advocating.
you going to be guaranteed that the people that move into these little rat boxes
do you-
are going to go ahead?
That's what gets us in trouble. That's what gets us in
No,
trouble.
but
These are
plans
people.
come in and listen, in defense of anybody who runs for these positions, this plan for the RTZ goes back to the 70s. If anybody wants to do their history, just so that you know, when Pinecrest Incorporated for these type of protections against the county. Precisely because it was rural. I don't think if you've been here for 15 years, you're seeing already kind of like a new Pinecrest. The way Pinecrest was, even when it incorporated, was much more rural than it is now.
And in fact,
And these plans, I'm not defending anyone, but we have to stay kind of like with what the history is that these kind of plans for the RTZ and the Metro have been on the books since the 70s. Thing is that it goes rolling, a ball keeps getting pushed forward, and then now is the time when you're asking, because now they think that we've got so many people moving in that we have to accommodate some type of transit. Now, the only thing that I feel that right now, there's so much building going on, everything is going vertical, that I don't think that Pinecrest needs to be the first ones to build anything.
Do it right along the busway.
Okay, because the accommodations that they're gonna have for all, my son's a firefighter. Most of those guys choose to travel and live an hour, 2 hours, because they work one day on and one day off. They have that ability.
One of the things I want to
Start building
mention.
the housing above the busway and above
So I don't think we have to
the
be
metro
first.
rails.
All right.
We just have to have zoning that will protect us in the future, but we don't have to be first with building too much.
One of the things I just want to mention, talking
You're
about
next.
why things happen the way they happen, the North Pinecrest District that allows for mixed use came about when the county was coming in and forcing higher density. John was part of that fight with Mr. Kramer, where they were trying to shove dayland, basically type densities, into Pinecrest. We went to court to fight and keep it to what it is now, and that's what birthed the Pinecrest North Business District. The concepts that are in there in the code already is what I would proffer should be just replicated, because they already bought into that. They accepted it. It went to a lawsuit. We won, right? That's how we got something that was substantially more controlled than what's happening across the highway. And so the arguments thinking ahead of setting it up so that we could potentially, if we had to fight, pack a house, right, and take buses down to the county, is you've accepted that transit-oriented development for the purposes of the county is 25 units an acre. Now, why are you going to shove 150 units an acre? So those are arguments potentially that we would be able to make, but we have to be the ones in the driver's seat, right? And that's the crux of things now. That wasn't the crux a year ago when we started this process. A year ago when we started the process, it was just about improving the corridor from us.
Remember, we found it, we've slowed it to the point it is now, and we've organized resistance against it ever since the first day it came about.
Right.
So that's what Pinecrest has been doing, is leading on this issue, in the stripes you were.
Yeah, so, you know, I think that if you gave everybody the choice, nobody wants the county plan, right? And if they have to choose, they're gonna choose the plan that you're proposing.
I've gathered that.
We all agree with that, right? Whether we like it or not. The other thing I would tell you, going back to the affordability here in Pinecrest, my wife has been a teacher for 25 years in Miami-Dade County Public Schools. I have 2 other family members who are teachers or friends here in the city as well, in Pinecrest. You want to get to affordability, start lowering the property tax. I pay $25,000 a year for property tax, okay? And I don't even send my kids to public school. So that to me is highway robbery, because 40% of that tax money that I'm paying isn't even going to teach my kids. So to you, Joe, quick question. And it's not that I have against you, by any stretch. I think you've done a great job trying to explain this to you.
Appreciate that, thank you.
I will ask you, what are our reserves right now, as far as a city? What do we hold in reserves?
Yes.
$7 million.
$7 million. Okay, I would spend that $7 million finding the county. Those are the guys trying to push us down our throat. You know, all these developers are hiring high-priced lobbyists to go lobby all these commissioners at the county level so that they push that crap on us. That's how it works.
But even if you were to erase...
I'm sorry, this city moves and is influenced by money and developers, okay? This happens all the time. I have friends who are developers, I hear the stories, and I know how they work. They buy these people off. If you want to influence the county, you bring in our commissioner, we talk to them, we tell them what it is. If they don't support that, we find someone else to run against them on the next election, and we start putting pressure on the county.
But
That's how you beat.
the question I would proffer to you, sir, would be, forget what the county's doing, right? Let's suppose that doesn't happen and doesn't exist. Would you still like the idea of introducing this type of development for the village? Forget about, I understand that this is an ominous thing that's back here, we can't forget it, I get it, but I'm saying in a perfect world, if that didn't happen a year ago when we embarked on this, we wanted to think about these ideas outside of that threat.
You know what it is? You probably have that nice inclination, or, you know, the road to hell is paved with good intentions, right? You have those good intentions. Whoever comes behind you or after you, we don't know how they're going to get influenced. So that's why everybody here is trying to figure out, how can you guarantee that this isn't going to turn into a circus later on in the rest of the
You can't,
meeting?
because
Right?
every time you have new elected officials, things could change.
And
Right.
so that's the thing. You have to lock it down so tight that nobody can come and screw with it later on, and that is very difficult to do.
Well, it's impossible.
Because we
It's
have to lock
impossible.
it down in the sense that, no, these are not going to be rental properties. These are only developments that can be for people who are gonna own and.
Right.
Well, so that's what we think of when we try to do the land use and zoning. Now, land use and zoning in the way that it works now is the local government's purview. We have control over that. But that means, and you know, my philosophy on this is we don't want to tie the hands of the government that's going to be here in 10, 15 years, or the next mayor and the next council. Let every group of citizens elect their elected representatives and make the decisions that are best for them at that time. So,
You gotta tie it down hard enough though, Joe, so that they can't just be influenced by the developer or whoever.
So we set our rules, we lock it down as tight as we can with our existing codes. But you don't want to be in a situation where you've tied the hands of the next elected officials in your community. There'll be a group of people that come behind us that elect a mayor, elect a council, and they need the right to make their own decisions. And Pinecrest has done pretty well so far, right? We've had a great group of people running it. We have great citizens, and we've done probably better than any other community in this county about trying to maintain our character in a changing environment. And I think we need to trust each other and do that. Because it's worked in the past. If you had a comment, then you.
I agree that you're going to have to give some type of leeway, but I agree also with the gentleman that we need to tie it down, saying, because those properties, believe it or not, they're not going to go for $100. They're going to go for millions and millions of dollars. And whatever property they're going to build it to sell, it's going to be high rise. Just like the one by my house over here they built, it's $1 million apartment. So those are all going to be high-end apartments. Doesn't exist. So forget about Medicaid people or forget about low-income people. Ain't going to happen. This is going to be high, right? Because you have 3, 4 owners on each of those properties. They're not going to settle for $50. They want top dollar for that property. Like if you sell your house now here, you're going to settle for 1.2, 1.3 million, top dollar. The same thing. They're not stupid. And this is going to take years for it to happen to come up with. So I agree, you need to set something, rules and regulations, say, okay, X amount, 25 or 30 or whatever it is, you need to set the rules now. And the people that come afterwards have to abide by what we do. We're the owner.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think the hard part about land use and zoning are the unintended consequences and things you don't necessarily. So you know, right. I think we could all agree that if we had teachers and stuff living in the community, that's better for everybody. How do you get to the point where you've incentivized that type of development? Is it smaller units? Is it larger units? Is it more height? Is it great? I mean, those are the type of things that we tinker with in a zoning code to achieve what we want to achieve. But what we're trying to do through these meetings is figure out what you like, figure out what you don't like, and figure out what zoning rules we can lock it down with to achieve our goal. And one behind. Skip, you haven't said anything.
Earlier, we like cafes and plazas in the restaurants. That's what answered the question. Yes.
Oh, thank you. Now, and then
I was going to say that I think that everybody, just like what he said, everybody's in favor of having nice areas to go dine and hang out and have a nice meandering area. That'd be great. Let's be cautious about not falling into the same trap that Coconut Grove is in.
Yeah.
Okay?
Or the Gables.
Amen.
That they made a zoning mistake.
We have, this is great, the charrettes were great, but truthfully, I don't know how that is really going to fit in. I like the looks of it. I like the idea. I'm not saying I don't, but I'm telling you, I'm concerned that we're going to fall into the same pit trap that Coconut Grove is in.
Well, what ends up happening, like I said, you set up the minimum standards. Let's say that I'm just throwing ideas out. We say, okay, move the development closer to US1, provide more buffer in the back for the residential, where you match up with the residences. You have to have X amount of open space with plazas. You have to add, I'm just throwing ideas, art in public places. You have to have, walkability, places where you connect, all this, planning kind of lingo that we try to build into a code, okay? At the end of the day, a developer will come, take a look at that code, look at the size of whatever X property, and then try to design, you're an architect, we'll try to design something that fits in there. It may look like one of these things. This is our wish list, right? We would give them our vision plan. When they come in to talk to us, we're gonna be like, listen, this is what we're looking for. We're looking for things to look like this. We want the architecture to feel like this. We want to see these elements. Green walls, you can throw all kinds of ideas at them. Then they develop a concept. Then they come to a council meeting and pitch the idea to the council, or to staff first, actually. We go back and forth telling them, no, this is ridiculous. We don't like this, change this, do that. And then they come to council for a public hearing. If it's not built in accordance to code, if they're gonna need any variances, if there's anything that doesn't fit the current code, it requires them to come before council. And then they have to sell the residents, because if not, you're gonna have angry people at a meeting hollering that this isn't what we want. That's the alternative to what ended up happening in Doral, which was you had the developers come and say, this is what we want to build, change the code so I can put this in.
But there was nothing there to begin with.
Right, but in our case, yes, we're retrofitting. We got to make it nice enough where the people are going to want to invest money and spend the money. Like the Sunnyland shopping centers, we've been for years, the two centers trying to get those property owners to work together because they're aging facilities and they're the center of town, and we were hoping that they would invest and do something great there, and they haven't wanted to put the money into it.
At the end of the day, it's return on your investment. And
Right.
everybody that's going to develop is going to develop
If
for
they-
as much as they're going to be able
Right.
to return. Now, the thing about it is that if you force a developer, let's say you put in your books, and I understand, you're going to appease the county by putting this into your books. Fine. It's not going to be up to you how they develop the site.
Correct.
You're going to be able to have control and parameters that you're going to use to control the developer. But at the end of the day, it's going to be the developer is going to be developing the site.
Correct.
Yeah, we're not the developer. We'll put the, we'll put the rules in place, and we'll make sure they develop to those rules.
Right.
That's what we do.
I understand, but there's got to be the appetite. The only concern, and that's the reason why I said, let's not fall into the pit trap of Coconut Grove, because you make this into condos, the developer is going to come in, he's going to set his price, he's going to get his money, and he's out of here.
Right.
Yeah, no question. I think that's the developer that develops most stuff, and that's what we need to. Yeah, I think we all agree on that. We need to protect ourselves from that, and I think we protect ourselves from it by setting our rules, right? And then they go ahead. You want to go.
So, city manager, what you're talking about is to have a lush tropical area where there's sitting space and walking space, and it's really nice, but that costs a lot of money. When you're talking about, I don't know, $3-4 million an acre or $5 million an acre, you're at $50 a square foot, something like that, or $100 a square foot. So you're not the amount of space that you're taking away from a parking space or from a building is now going to make whatever building space you have to be so much. So you're going to create a scenario where the developers are going to say, I got to go up. And they're gonna force the issue.
Or it doesn't get built.
If you're, but you're gonna have a fight on your hands because they're gonna want to go up.
Why wouldn't we have that fight now? You're allowed 4 stories. You're allowed commercial mixed use in every district. Why wouldn't they fight with us now?
Because 4 stories doesn't work. Because 4 stories doesn't work on any of these sites, because if you've got to do it, you've got to go up 10, 15 stories to be able to have the density on up to be able to do what you need on the ground. So I believe whatever you're thinking of
How
is...
high would you like us to go?
45 feet.
That's where we are.
I got it. I got it.
That's where we are.
Right, but if you're going to add any apartments, especially to that Home Depot area, then because you're saying, and I respectfully disagree with your total premise on it, that grandma wants to go there, that those 600 or 1,000 apartments are going to lower the value of our houses because of that type of residential area diluting what we've got, and so the investment that we have in our houses is going to go down. So if grandma wants to sell, well, I disagree with you. If grandma wants to sell her house for the most amount of money, then there aren't going to be apartments that are going to be over there.
How much did your property value go down since they put the metro rail in and built Dateland? What do you think it went down, your property value?
That's 25 years.
I know, so they
But
went
I
down
think
how
part
much?
of the argument, with all due respect, if we can go back to the beginning, before a lot of people came in, you made a comment about more than likely a new draft of the ordinance will be presented by Commissioner Gilbert in January.
I don't know when, but I think sooner rather than later.
Right, and then you mentioned something about that the ordinance may include that the developer would have the right to enforce the county's current code regardless of what we change.
No, that's not right.
I'm thinking, why are we so worried about changing if they have the right to appeal it, like you were saying?
So first off, let's not speculate. I have no idea what's going to happen. What I've heard but not confirmed is that it's, what I've heard from the commissioner directly, it's going sooner rather than later. The appealability issue may or may not be, and I have not seen any draft. When we see the draft, we'll speculate. I don't want to speculate on things that we haven't seen yet. Ignoring this and pretending that it's going away and not planning for the future is a very bad decision. Now, whether we did this for the rapid transit zone or not, it doesn't matter. We were contemplating revisiting the US1 zoning in the first place. Now, we've done this, we do this constantly. We review the zoning code every year when it comes. We don't like the size and scale of the institutional buildings, the schools. We work with them, we get the right scale. We don't like what came out of the ground on the zoning code for the McMansions, on the estate density properties. We work with them to scale that back down. This is no different than that, except for this time, we're ahead of it. We see the shopping centers have turned over. We see the redevelopment starting to happen on the US1. It's time to take yourself out of a 1950s code and into a code that looks forward. That's what we're doing here, regardless about the rapid transit zone. That's part of this conversation. Okay, it's after 8 o'clock. I'll stay around for as long as anybody wants. If you all want to stay, we'll all stay.